Hey everybody, it's Alex. I am here to do my weekly video and give a little bit of a life update. I did a quick test of the audio a minute ago because I put off doing this video today as long as I possibly could because the bar across the street has some sort of like karaoke open mic night situation, and I can hear the music from inside my apartment, and I was worried that like the mic would pick up enough of that music from across the street that like a video could get flagged for, copyright when it's not even me, it's the bar across the street. I didn't hear anything when I tested the audio, so that's great. But if you do hear anything in the background and it's not like my cats or something, it's probably the bar across the street. Gosh, no, sorry, I thought I saw something. Other than that, I also put off the video. Oh, by the way, of course, we are in, I want to acknowledge, a different corner of my apartment. It's not the usual corner that I've started filming in, and that's because I do need my laptop for this video, and I want it to be on something stable. So it's on my dining room table, and then behind me I've got my sewing table. Not that I actually sew yet. I have my hair down for this video. Show off my new curls a bit. But I also put off doing this video because Thursdays are not only some kind of karaoke open mic night at the bar across the street, it also coincides with the day that I do therapy after work. So I do my whole day at work. I then do my therapy, come home and have dinner, try to like decompress a bit. And sometimes I have no problem getting on here and doing a video and being all, hey everybody. And other times it's harder. Therapy goes a little heavier, and it's harder for me after that to then put on makeup, because I often don't, and get on here and be all, hi everybody. I think most of the time I've been able to do it pretty well, and this time was harder. And I remember there was a time a couple weeks ago where I didn't get the video in on Thursday. I think I made like an apology video that day, and then I barely got it in over the weekend. I got it in like at like 11 o'clock or something on Sunday, and maybe I need to clean the lens. How long has it been since I've cleaned the camera lens? And I don't really have cleaner. Oh wow. Where was I? Therapy Sundays, yes. So sometimes it's harder for me to do this video. I really believe in authenticity, so I want to tell you guys that and be open and honest that like this isn't going to be quite as perky as some of my videos are. This one's going to be a little bit more subdued. I also didn't totally finish the script. I had some issues with that, and this is also part of like my life update, check-in situation. I had most of the script ready to go because it's another draft that I wanted to finish from a long time ago, like my horror and hope punk video that I did. And a couple of things. One is that, like, I have it all outlined, right? And I have, I think, the bulk of the essay written. Yay! That's great. I'm gonna be mostly scripted tonight, I think. But then I knew that I had written some quotes down from a book that I was going to use. Could not find the quotes anywhere. I looked in all of my files, so I don't know if I accidentally threw them away when I was, like, cleaning my desk. And I did find, the book, which I love. I found both books that I was probably going to use. This one in particular. And as you can see, there's, I marked pages. Great. So I was like, okay, I can't find the quotes written down, but maybe I can find the quotes again. And so I went to those pages, and I don't know. Like, I marked where in the book, but I didn't mark which passage. And I have no idea, like, what section of the essay. I knew what section I assumed it was going to be for, but no. I went over it multiple times, could not figure it out. So, I'm going to be freestyling a little bit tonight, a little bit of improv that will be partially scripted. And the other thing is that I have this project, this YouTube project that I'm working on, which, yes, there is a specific video project that I'm doing this series, but, like, YouTube as a whole is a project for me, and I have other projects as well that I am working on. I'm trying to increase my social media presence, as you've seen, like, throughout this week, especially posting about my hair transformation, which is great. But also I've got some other things in the works that I want to share with you guys, and those things also require time and mental, emotional effort, energy, all the things. And I just struggled to balance and prioritize this week, I'll be honest. And I think part of that is just some things on my mind this week. I am in an awkward spot. So I said, I've been saying and meaning that I think things are going to be getting better for me. The year of the snake isn't quite over yet, though. And I still fully believe that, like, I do think that an upswing is coming. It's just not here yet. So things are still kind of tight right now, but I know more good news from this week, okay? Good news. Was it last week? Whichever, regardless. It's good news. The lawsuit from my first accident last year, so yes, I was in actually 2 car accidents last year. Neither of them were my fault. The first time, a lady ran a red light, and so suddenly she was in my lane and wasn't supposed to be there. And clipped the front of my car. And to her credit, like, she acknowledged it right away. She admitted it was her fault. She ran the red light. I really respect her for that. Trying to make space for Tux to sit in the window because I am kind of taking up his spot a little bit. Second time around, I pulled into a parking lot and a guy backed up out of his spot. He didn't look to see that I was there and hit me and insisted that I hit him, and that's a different thing. I'm not getting into that right now. The point is, the lawsuit from the first accident is like paying out. So the check has been sent from her insurance to my lawyers. So my lawyers, got to take their cut. Safe has to get paid, and then I'm going to get about $3,000. And I talked to the assistant at the law firm, who told me that, the lawyer is going to put my check in the mail as soon as possible. So that money is coming. I just don't know exactly when. Like, as soon as possible, but that's not exactly giving me, 1 to 3 business days, 2 weeks. The money is coming. It's just not here yet. And so I'm in this awkward position at the moment where I'm in, a little bit of a limbo. But I'm making it. It's fine. It's just it's tight, but it's doable. But that's been a lot of stress on me since I got kicked off of OHP, which is Medicaid, one of the two, for the income limit. And so now, like in my entire adult life, I have had OHP. So I've never paid for medication. I've never paid for doctor's appointments. And now I have to do that. And, because I have my work insurance, thank goodness, I have insurance through work, but then OHP would just cover whatever my primary insurance didn't. And I don't have that anymore. So, I'm having to come up with money for my medications. I'm on a payment plan for an appointment in January that I'll be paying into April. But I have an appointment that's supposed to be this month. It's a thing. And all of that has just been really on my mind and making it difficult to have the attention for everything that I've needed. So I think that's all of my life update right now. Things are getting better. It's still just coming down the pipeline, and I've got a lot of things that I'm wanting to do. I'm having to split all of it. So that is my life update. Just hanging in there until the upswing. So as for the actual essay video, let me pull that up again. As I kind of go through, and again, I have a lot of it done, but there's a few places not filled in, and I don't even, what was I trying to do? What were those sticky notes in the book for? I don't know. Were they even related to this project? Maybe not. It was for something different. So, you know, for instance, I was going to have a whole section on how vampires were depicted before Interview with the Vampire. I can put my feet up. That's awesome. It's much more comfortable. Huh. Okay. Because this video was going to be about, like, how an aspect of how vampires have been portrayed since Interview with the Vampire, especially the movie, which I don't know if I can really say, like, it's more popular than the book, but probably because it's like it's a visual medium. It's a 2-ish hour movie. I forget the exact runtime, but I would guess, you know, that more people have seen the movie than have read the book. So I was gonna have this whole, like, before thing to set up current situation, and then getting into Louis and Lestat from the books first, which is interesting of me to have wanted to do, because their relationship, as I've kind of touched on, I believe it's woven in and out, because Louis himself comes in and out of the story at different points, and sometimes he plays a more prominent role, and sometimes he's in, like, one scene, and that has to do with Anne struggling to write him and be in that mindset, given how much he personified her grief. And so, you know, and then on top of that, there's, like, Interview with the Vampire itself is such a different book from the ones that come after it. Characterizations are different. So you have that book. Louis isn't in most of the Vampire Lestat, because most of the Vampire Lestat takes place in the past. He shows up a little bit in the section where Lestat does cover the events of Interview with the Vampire, kind of summarizes it from his perspective, shares things that he knew or saw or went through that Louis wasn't aware of, and then otherwise he shows up in the epilogue to reunite with Lestat before Lestat's San Francisco concert, and he's there for the concert. You know, we love a supportive husband. And then, you know, Lestat is abducted by Akasha. And so then we have Queen of the Damned, where, you know, Louis is involved in trying to figure out, okay, who's Akasha? What's going on with, like, why does she want Lestat? What is the deal with, like, these dreams that we've been having of these redheaded twins? But never from his perspective. His perspective is only Interview with the Vampire. So we're only seeing him through the eyes of other characters. Then we get to, Tale of the Body Thief. And he's in prominent. I love this scene that he is in that. Wait, guess technically he's in more than one scene. He's in the A section of that book, and it just, gosh, the chemistry between Louis and Lestat is so much fun to read, and it's like, I'm not gonna spoil future things for people who aren't familiar with the book. I'm really gonna try to take the books as they're adapted, which is gonna get a little bit weird with Tale of the Body Thief, because like as book fans, we're looking at the show and wondering, how are they doing this? But I can get to that later. Memnoch the Devil. I'm trying to remember how much Louis is in that one. He might not actually appear himself, at least. And that's kind of the thing, is that yes, they do have their reunion in the Vampire Lestat, but because of Anne's struggle to continue writing Louis, like, he comes in and out of the story, and as a result, his relationship with Lestat is, I'm going to call it a situationship. Like, they stay in communication, they know where to find one another, they do spend time together. Louis crashes on Lestat's couch sometimes. It's, you know, and then they kind of like go their separate ways, and like Lestat has his adventures, Louis is doing Louis things, and then they kind of, you know, it goes back and forth. And then in the last 3 books is when they really commit to not just a situationship, but like, no, we are really partners from now on. No more of this kind of meeting up and then going our separate ways, and then, no, we are together now. So for me to have a whole section to talk about how Louis and Lestat are in the book series canon is a little complicated. I think I covered it generally. He's in Merrick. Does he appear? He just comes in and out. So it's like, I don't know what past me was thinking as far as like concrete, you know, to trace things. And then we get into the movie version, and that's when I really start to actually have a script. So for the movie, which funnily enough, like, I covered some of this already in previous videos, but you know, whatever. So in 1994, Interview with the Vampire hit theaters, introducing Anne Rice's debut novel to a wider audience and changing how vampires are commonly depicted in media even more than the books already had. The tale that readers already loved was brought to new life on screen, with favorite characters portrayed by popular actors, as well as a stunning performance from a young Kirsten Dunst. In order to adapt the original story, which spanned decades to fit the constraints of a 1990s theatrical release, however, some elements of the book were excised, condensed, or streamlined. I always struggle to pronounce this name. Frenier, I believe. Frenier family was completely left out of the film, including Louis' complicated relationship with Babette. Louis and Claudia's journey through Eastern Europe was depicted through a voiceover accompanied by Claudia's drawings, and most curiously, Louis' entire family was removed from the story, only to be replaced by an unnamed wife and daughter who are, I think, he may just say child, but for some reason it just sticks in my head that the child in question was a daughter. Regardless, his wife and child are said to have died before the movie starts and are subsequently forgotten, probably to try to make Louis seem straight in one of the weirdest and most egregious examples of fridging. Lestat's father was also written out of the story, along with little hints of Lestat's backstory that accompanied him, which is something that I totally missed in my book review of Interview with a Vampire, is that Lestat's father is actually there for a hot minute in the beginning of the novel. Lestat comes to New Orleans with his father, moves into Louis' mansion with his father, and is actually like taking care of him. Not in the kindest and happiest of ways, because that relationship, Lestat's father was not a nice man. Not meant to be a dad in any way, and Lestat is a very loving and forgiving person who is dedicated to taking care of his father, who is like the last surviving like human relative that he has through the rest of the end of his life. But also there's some bitterness and some anger and some resentment for all of the ways that his father had treated him growing up, including physical harm. And so he's taking care of him, but doesn't have the best bedside manner, I'll put it that way. And then he does, like, his father does die. And none of that appears in the movie adaptation. Also doesn't appear in the TV show adaptation. During the interview, New Orleans time period. It does look like we are going to see him in flashbacks in season 3, but he obviously doesn't go to New Orleans with Lestat in the show. So, a little bit of a tangent there. But what's most important to note as far as this conversation is concerned is that the film does indeed address only the first book. Yes, the movie is an adaptation of the first book, but what I mean is that the film takes the first book in isolation. It adapts the story and the characters as they're presented in the first book, without really factoring in any of the other books already published at the time, which were The Vampire Lestat in 1985, The Queen of the Damned in 1988, and The Tale of the Body Thief in 1992. This is why I will say, for instance, that Antonio Banderas did a good job portraying Armand as far as the film is concerned. He did exactly what he needed to do to play Armand as he was shown in that story specifically. He might not have done a great job at portraying Armand in general, but he wasn't supposed to, and The Vampire Armand wasn't published until 1998. So, the in-depth exploration of his backstory, because he gives a summarized version in The Vampire Lestat. The full, detailed version wouldn't be published until after the movie, so... this means that the wider audience, by which I mean people who just saw the movie without ever reading the books, are getting a very particular, dare I say, incomplete version of who Louis and Lestat are as individuals and as a couple. Interview with a Vampire is not the one true version of events, but one perspective out of multiple. Lestat, Armand, and even Claudia all have their opportunities to provide their takes on elements of the original story. For that matter, the characters themselves are different in subsequent books, as I alluded to about Armand, though most notably different character is Lestat himself. None of the film's characters receive the level of depth or complexity that they develop in the book series, which is not to say they don't have any depth. or any complexity. I'm not saying that, just they don't achieve the level that they do in the books over, that whole span of time from 1976 to 2016, literal decades. And I suppose this is somewhat, my perspective of, what wider audiences would have left the theater with. But wider audiences left the theater with the idea of Louis as the brooding, tortured vampire who hates what he is because he still cares about human life and morals, the vampire with stubbornly lingering humanity who still cares about human depictions of goodness and justice. He thinks of vampirism as a curse and rejects his choice, and that's it. They were left with the perception of Lestat as purely selfish, hedonistic vampire who not only lacks a moral compass and any care for human life, but also has disdain toward Louis for caring about humans. He thinks of vampirism as a real gift and enjoys every minute of his undead existence. And that's it. Both are incomplete understandings of who they are, but that's like the general idea casual viewers could have of them if they're not aware that, for instance, Louis doesn't have a type and will feed from anyone he wants to, regardless of age, and that Lestat actively opposed becoming a vampire, which is something that was addressed in season 1 of the show. Yeah, Akasha has this, interesting bit with Louis where she talks about how, most vampires have a type, and Lestat and Louis just kind of, it's more who catches his eye in the moment. Anyway, the film dynamic was a hit, though, with the two being narrative foils to each other, offering two contrasting views on vampirism. And so, true to the characters or not, that dynamic became replicated in preceding works. Louis and Lestat, or at least their film versions, became a template on which other vampire duos were intentionally or unintentionally based. The brooding vampire missing his lost humanity, and the vampire who is dead and loving it. The word archetype is derived from the Greek word archetypos, which means original pattern. An article in Brittanica provides the literary definition for archetype as, quote, a primordial image, character, or pattern of circumstances that recurs throughout literature and thought consistently enough to be considered a universal concept or situation. The same article elaborates, the term was adopted and popularized by literary critics from the writings of psychologist Carl Jung, who formulated a theory of a collective unconscious. For Jung, the varieties of human experience have somehow been genetically coded and transferred to successive generations. These primordial image patterns and situations evoke startlingly similar feelings in both reader and author. The Canadian literary critic and theorist Northrop Frye was influential in extending the use of the term archetype to specifically literary contexts. A masterclass article on the 12 literary archetypes acknowledges the overlap between archetypes, cliches, stock characters, and stereotypes, noting that, quote, as a general rule, common archetypes and stock characters provide guidelines for characterization, while stereotypes and cliches are negative labels used to describe bad or shallow thinking. Water break. I'm trying to, this whole staying hydrated thing, and I have mixed feelings about it. One of the 12 literary archetypes, for example, is the hero, which the same masterclass article defines as the protagonist who rises to meet a challenge and saves the day. LiteraryTerms.net, in its article on literary archetypes, elaborates. Hero stories have certain elements in common. Heroes generally start out in ordinary circumstances, are called to adventure, and in the end must confront their darkest fear in a conflict that deeply transforms the hero. Luke Skywalker is a perfect example of this archetype. He's born on Tatooine, is called to adventure by R2-D2 and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I guess technically also by Leia? Technically, because it's her. Anyway, I guess that's R2. Anyway, back to the quote. Is called to adventure by R2-D2 and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then must face Darth Vader in order to become a Jedi. Other examples of the 12 literary archetypes include the trickster, such as Loki, the mentor, such as Professor X, and the creator, such as Dr. Victor Frankenstein. It's worth noting that Joseph Campbell, the academic who articulated the concept of the hero's journey in his 1949 novel, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which George Lucas read prior to creating Star Wars, took the original 12 archetypes, added his own ideas, and came up with 8 character archetypes specific to the hero's journey. As Joseph Campbell identified 8 character archetypes that reoccur in different iterations of the hero's journey, the 1994 film versions of Louis and Lestat have become or are becoming archetypes in vampire media. Neither are wholly original, probably as a result of streamlining their characterizations from their literary versions for the sake of runtime. Lestat fits into the archetype of the outlaw, defined by the Masterclass article as, quote, the rebel who won't abide by society's demands, strengths, independent thinking, virtue, owes no favors, weaknesses, self-involved, potentially criminal. Compare this with how Lestat is presented in both the film and the book, through what Louis says about him and how he is depicted as a character on screen. Lestat is a hedonist who admits that he kills humans because he enjoys it, as well as for sustenance. He baby traps Louis into staying with him by turning Claudia into a vampire, choosing her specifically to spite Louis, and upon hearing part of Louis' interview with Daniel, simply complains about Louis' morose attitude. Louis' characterization in the film, which carries over from the book, as the book is from his perspective, is what TV Tropes, yet again, refers to as the Byronic hero. Quote, the Byronic hero is a character notable for being sullen, withdrawn, hard to like and hard to know, but usually possessing a rich inner life and a softer side accessible only to a special few. This type of character was popularized by the works of Lord Byron. These protagonists often embodied this archetype, though they did exist before him. Rarely a true hero, this character is more often an anti-hero, but can also be an anti-villain or just a villain. Byronic heroes are charismatic characters with strong passions and ideals, but who are nonetheless deeply flawed individuals who may act in ways which are socially reprehensible, being definitely contrary to mainstream society. A Byronic hero has his own side and his own set of beliefs which he will not bow nor change for anyone. His internal conflicts are heavily romanticized, and who himself ponders and wrestles with his struggles and beliefs. The quote at the top of the page from Albert Camus' The Rebel elaborates, the Byronic hero, incapable of love or capable only of an impossible love, suffers endlessly. He is solitary, languid, his condition exhausts him. If he wants to feel alive, it must be in the terrible exaltation of a brief and destructive action. The same article acknowledges that vampires are often written as this kind of character, as a way to romanticize and humanize an otherwise disturbing creature. It's worth a reminder that neither of these characterizations are inherently inaccurate, just incomplete. There are shades of truth to how Louis and Lestat are depicted in the 1994 film. Quote, he wears woe as others wear velvet, sorrow flatters him like the light of candles, tears become him like jewels. That is how Lestat describes Louis in The Tale of the Body Thief. Lestat, while providing his perspective on the events that Louis described to Daniel, specifically detailing his motivation to turn Claudia, says of himself in The Vampire Lestat, but why was it that for purely selfish reasons I didn't listen to some of the advice given me? Why didn't I learn from any of them? Gabrielle, Armand, Marius. But then, I never have listened to anyone, really. Somehow or other, I never can. And then I have a giant gap, apparently, where I was going to write more. So, the next section that I have is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Spike and Angel. Justifications, subversions, and metatextual references. Season 1 of 1997's Buffy the Vampire Slayer introduces us to the enigmatic Angel, played by David Boreanaz, who gives Buffy her signature cross necklace and who seems to know an unusual amount of information about the supernatural. Partway through the season, after he and Buffy kiss, it's revealed that Angel is a vampire, which according to the internet was a major twist at the time. I did not watch the show when it first aired, let's just put it that way. It's explained that while vampires in the Buffyverse lack their human souls and therefore don't feel any remorse or guilt for their actions, Angel was cursed by the Romani as an act of revenge. He has his soul and therefore feels regret for everything he did before his ensoulment. Which, he was, the worst vampire on record, basically. Horrific stuff. This gives him an in-universe justification for his constant misery, especially once the twist about his curse is revealed. Angel, driven by a need to atone for his for his past actions and inspired by Buffy herself, is a vampire who tries to protect humans from monsters. In Season 2, we're introduced to two new vampires, Spike and Drusilla, played by James Marsters and Juliet Landau, who have a complicated relationship with Angel. Namely, they knew him when he was still evil. When Spike comes to town and crashes parent-teacher night at Sunnydale High in order to kill Buffy, Angel shows up and pretends to kidnap Buffy's friend Xander in an attempt to pretend to still be evil, gain Spike's trust, and thwart his plan. He claims that he's still feeding from humans, but that he pretends otherwise so that Buffy doesn't go after him, to which Spike remarks that people still fall for that Anne Rice routine. What a world. Of course, Angel is actually as emotionally tortured as he claims to pretend to be, so Spike's reference actually serves to hang a lampshade. If Angel is Louis, Spike is Lestat. Ironically, Spike himself gets in on the Anne Rice routine, arguably starting in late in the same season when Angel has actually gone evil again and, to Spike's dismay, has gotten between him and Drusilla. Spike teams up with Buffy to save the world, and after a brief appearance in Season 3, continues his journey in Season 4 when a secret military unit forcibly implants a microchip into his brain that causes him debilitating pain whenever he tries to harm a human. Season 4 was kind of wild. Unable to continue his old way of life, at least directly, Spike slowly starts to find a new purpose in helping Buffy, though it's initially not due to altruism as much as it's hope that Buffy will eventually love him back. After the traumatic conclusion to Season 6, Spike chooses to earn back his soul and resolves to help Buffy purely out of care for her, whether she forgives him or not for his heinous actions. This is somewhat juxtaposed by Angel's arc in his own spin-off series, where the threat of him losing his soul and becoming evil again is always present, and eventually happens in Season 4. Angel's struggle for redemption sometimes inspires him to extend the opportunity for a second chance to other characters, such as Faith. And after a crisis in which he loses hope in ever earning that redemption, Angel decides to fight evil in order to save those in need instead of doing it for possible reward. Eventually, in order to defeat a big bad, Angel and his friends No, I wrote that right. Eventually, in order to defeat a big bad, Angel and his friends need knowledge that only Angel's evil alter ego has, 'cause the difference between Angel and Angelus changed from Buffy to Angel, and Buffy Angelus is more Angel off leash, whereas in his own show, Angelus is portrayed as a completely separate personality, which is kind of a wrinkle in the lore, but whatever. They reluctantly make the decision to remove Angel's soul in order to interrogate Angelus, who breaks free to wreak havoc among Angel's friends and in Los Angeles at large. This eventually leads to Angel and Angelus battling for control inside their shared mind, with Angel winning the fight thanks to some encouragement from Faith, who refuses to give up on Angel because he was the only person who understood her struggle and believed in her ability to become a better person. In Angel Season 5, Spike and Angel are reunited at the end of their respective journeys and are forced by circumstances to address their previous relationship as well as how they've changed. They come to blows over their mutual desire to be the hero while questioning each other's motives, with Angel believing that Spike only wants to spite him by taking away something important, and Spike confronting Angel about his role in his original turn to evil. After Spike is temporarily mutilated by a woman who mistakenly believes that he slaughtered her family, he admits that he doesn't have the right to be upset because while he wasn't the one who killed them, he did murder others. He mourns the idea that Dana has become a monster just like he and Angel. Angel, who is willingly keeping him company, counters that Dana is, quote, an innocent victim. Spike points out that they were both innocent victims as well, a long time ago, and Angel sadly agrees. Ultimately, they're able to bond in their fruitless attempt to save Fred from dying and end the series as allies, complete with a better understanding of who they've both become, having strayed from their original appearances to meet somewhere in the middle. It's also confirmed by Spike that they did sleep together, quote, that one time. Just an important little side note. Next section, the Vampire Diaries, Stefan and Damon. Sometimes accused of riding on the coattails of Twilight despite predating the franchise and not having very much in common with the Mormon housewife fantasy, the Vampire Diaries bravely asks the question, what happens if we turn Louis and Lestat into brothers? Then, despite its gothic horror trappings, doesn't actually do anything to answer that question. Instead, putting Stefan and Damon in competition for Elena's affections. There are a few teases, such as Damon casually interrupting an early morning makeout session by literally jumping into bed with them and remarking that it's nothing, quote, he hasn't seen before. Stefan, for his part, doesn't seem too fazed by this, and later referring to Elena as our girlfriend. Stefan is the one who says, I can maintain tense, right? Stefan is the one who forces Damon into completing his transformation into a vampire, feeding from a woman in front of Damon so that her blood would entice Damon to do the same, which he does while Stefan watches. Because, again, 2026. We know the metaphors, right? We're good on that? We're clear on that? Okay, cool. An argument could be made that perhaps the fact that they keep falling in love with the same woman, Catherine and then Elena, might be indicative of something, but sharing a love interest, sometimes literally, since Catherine was dating them both at once, is as far as it goes. That being said, the rest of Louis and Lestat's film dynamic is still there, down to how Stefan and Damon are depicted in some of the show's marketing, such as the series description on Peacock. Or at least what it was when I still had access to Peacock. It might have changed, I don't know. Stefan is defined as the good brother, while Damon is considered the evil brother. Stefan hates being a vampire, usually fights against the desire for human blood by killing woodland creatures, tries to live a somewhat normal life, and has a reputation for honesty, trustworthiness, and caring about human well-being. He is repeatedly referred to in universe as well as the good brother. Damon, on the other hand, loves being a vampire, happily kills humans, and has a reputation for being manipulative and deceitful. He is referred to as the evil brother multiple times, including to his face. Stefan either encourages Damon to listen to his better angels or writes him off as a lost cause. Damon tries to convince Stefan to accept his vampiric nature and stop moping about Mystic Falls. Of course, both characters are actually more complicated than that, even if other characters don't always recognize the fact. Stefan has a cruel side that can rival Damon, and has a very bloody past. Damon, used to being considered the evil brother, struggles to accept his growth as his conscience reawakens. Their relationship with Elena often serves as a catalyst for their actions or suffers as a result. An interesting thing about the way that the brooding hero versus dead and loving it dynamic is portrayed through Stefan and Damon, aside from the natural consequence of using a template created by a romantic couple for two brothers, is the way that the show distills both roles down into good and evil. Stefan is good because he doesn't kill humans, Damon is evil because he does. This happens with Spike and Angel too, the vampire with a soul played against a soulless vampire, but it seems more pronounced in the Vampire Diaries than it does in the Buffyverse, probably because it's clear that Angel is trying to be good. He wants to be good, but he embodies the good versus evil paradigm within himself thanks to Angelus, who is always present and always ready to resurface. Spike also performs several good deeds prior to getting his soul back, which in itself, by definition, was something he chose to do while soulless, and therefore lacking an innate moral compass. This complexity does exist within Stefan and Damon as well, but again, even the show's marketing tries to present the brothers as occupying opposite ends of a distinct moral binary, instead of portraying them both as ambiguous. So I think what I was getting at there is that they're trying to do, is it feels to me that they were trying to like have their cake and eat it too, have it both ways kind of a thing, where the brothers are actually much more complicated than like initially, oh, you're good, you're evil. Showing Stefan's darker side, showing more noble aspects to Damon, but then still also like referring to them as, oh, you're the good one, you're the evil one. And like almost like the show, or at least the marketing, wasn't always willing to admit to the moral complexity that was present in the show. Like, you guys wrote this. You guys wrote the complexity in these two characters, and yet you also seem to be trying to downplay it or say that it doesn't exist, or still trying to portray one is wholly good and always to be trusted, and the other one is wholly evil and never to be trusted. It's something really weird that I noticed while watching. And then my third example, because I love threes. Yeah. Okay. The third example is from little known, that's not sarcasm, I think it is little known, vampire show Moonlight. Anyone else remember that show? I loved it. I did watch that show while I was water break, maybe that'll help. I did watch that show while it was airing, and I was so disappointed that it wasn't renewed for a second season, especially with that cliffhanger. I love it. Like, and I've recently rewatched it. Actually, since writing this, I've rewatched it, and I still love it. I think it's great. I think it deserved better. On my list of TV shows, it's an unofficial list, but on my unofficial list of TV shows that deserved better, there's Moonlight and there's Firefly. Yeah. On one level, you could argue that Moonlight is kind of an XP of Angel, with like the vampire private detective in LA falls in love with pretty blonde woman, but I don't care. It's still good. It's still fun. Anyway, to actually address what I wrote about the show, and instead of just geeking out over it, Moonlight has its own variation of the template, one filled with early aughts, homoerotic but no homo bromance. Mick St. John and Joseph Costin are ostensibly just friends, buddies, and confidants with their own respective love interests. They're best friends with no concept of personal space, a tendency to straighten each other's clothes and enter each other's apartments uninvited, and that's without getting into the scene where Mick begs Joseph to turn him back into a vampire. Seriously, go ahead and pause here. Go watch that scene on YouTube. Then come back to this. You'll see what I'm talking about. Also, this next scene that I'm referencing, Joseph once bites his girlfriend in front of Mick and then offers to let Mick feed from her as well, with which both parties consent to. Watch that scene as well. I think it's from the finale. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is. It might be the episode before that. But yeah, again, metaphors, right? 2026, we know that. Joseph also isn't uncomfortable with any implied off-screen nudity between them, waking Mick up in the middle of the day and only getting Mick something to cover up with when asked, and not bothering to cover himself up when Mick interrupts a massage. And, of course, Mick is the broody vampire foil to Joseph's Grateful Dead. Mick drinks exclusively from blood bags, while Joseph has a harem of willing donors, his eventual girlfriend included. And for all that I ship Mick and Joseph, absolutely, I do think that, like, the little bit that we see of Joseph and his lawyer girlfriend is actually really cute, and I like it. I was clearly going to develop that some more, but I didn't know how to rewatch the show, and then I happened to find it later. And now we have Interview with the Vampire, Louis and Lestat, revisited. In 2022, 28 years after the film, Louis and Lestat returned to the screen in Interview with the Vampire, an ongoing television series by AMC, now portrayed by Jacob Anderson and Sam Reed and no longer bound by the time constraints of a single feature-length film. Both characters have more room to breathe. They are immediately more complicated than their film counterparts and are given much more time to develop, to grow, and change. Perhaps most crucially, AMC's Interview with the Vampire doesn't take the first book in isolation, as the film did. Instead, the creative team behind the show is aware of and engaging with the entire series. The show's first 2 seasons address the first book while keeping future developments in mind and reworking some of them to occur earlier, such as Louis' suicide attempt in Season 2, Episode 5, which doesn't appear in the books until Merrick, which came out in 2000. The 3rd season, however, is set to adapt the Vampire Lestat for arguably the first time, since 2002's so-called adaptation of Queen of the Damned took some major liberties when taking parts the 2nd book for the sequel movie. And then I was going to talk about, like, the modern depictions of Louis and Lestat compared with their 1994 counterparts and where they fit in a genre that their earlier portrayals impacted so greatly. And so, like, comparing the 1994 to AMC's and how they kind of, like, inform how the previous versions informed the current ones. And I think what I really have to say about that, I mean, there's so much. Why didn't I just turn that into its own video? Like, a lot of this video is me trying to figure out what past me was thinking. Interrogating my past self. Obviously, like, the time period was changed up, so the show starts in 1910, and, like, the impact that alone would have on the characters, you know, Louis growing up in a different context than colonial New Orleans. Lestat, his backstory still takes place at the same time as the book, although how they're going to change some of his backstory. So Lestat, it's worth noting, in the books was only 20 when he was turned into a vampire. He, like, shortly before his 21st birthday, he did not make it to 21. Sam Reed, I think, was 34 while filming season 1, I think. So how exactly they're going to adjust Lestat's timeline to accommodate for that. We don't really know yet, but like he still was turned at around the same time. So that means instead of, I think it was 10 years in the books between Lestat becoming a vampire and then coming to New Orleans and meeting Louis. 1910 minus 1794 is math that I cannot do in my head, but he waited a lot longer, lived a much longer span of time before meeting Louis. And like, what impact does that then have on his character? And when he talks about loneliness, right? And then, of course, there's the fact that Louis is black in AMC's adaptation, and the impact that that has on his character. He's Creole. And it's something that I, on the one hand, want to talk about, and on the other hand, don't think that I'm someone who should. And so I think I'd rather just like acknowledge it, stick a pin in it, maybe come back to that later, or maybe just refer you to other people who have talked about it, who I think are more qualified to address it than someone who basically glows in the dark. I think that's fair. I think that's right. But that does have an impact, of course, on the story, and I think we've seen parts of it, but honestly, thinking about it right now, season 2 really showed in a big way, I think, that some of the things that we saw in season 1 and some of the things from the original interview were not true. Not that Louis is necessarily a liar, although I think there were some deliberate lies. Like, he himself in a clip that we've seen from season 3 acknowledges, like, he's a liar in the book, or looks like it, and then, like, the version of the book that Daniel wrote and then the Talamasca screwed around with. But he also believed a lot of things that just weren't true. Memory is a monster. And also there's the Armand of it all. And as a result, like, we already kind of knew that in season 1. Memory is a monster was a theme in season 1. There was a whole, was it raining bit, but then season 2, I think, really expanded on that and blew that wide open with certain reveals. Episode 5 stands out. Yeah, again, I love episode 5. It's one of my favorites, I think. And I say I think because I love all the episodes so much. I don't even want to, like, sit down and try to figure out a favorite. But I keep coming, like, episode 1, season 1, is one I come back to a lot. If I just have time to watch, like, one episode, I'm either going to watch that one or season 2, episode 5. I guess they're my comfort watches from the show, which, especially season 2, episode 5, that might be a weird choice, right? But it is, and I think it's partly just because the Devil's Minion is one of my favorite ships in the franchise, and it's just fun to see, like, how that all started. Anyway, and so there's so much that we haven't seen the truth of, and so I think it'd be really interesting to compare the versions of Louis and Lestat, especially since, like, the show itself doesn't directly address the movie itself, but obviously, like, one of the conceits of the show is that original 1976 interview did happen, did end, with Louis almost killing Daniel and then leaving. And then this, 50 years later, is take 2. The honest version. Truth and reconciliation and all that. And so it's interrogating the past interview, the differences between the 1976 interview and how the story is told in modern day, so on and so forth. So it'll be interesting to kind of compare. Since the 1994 movie is based off of the story as presented to Daniel in the 1976 interview with like direct quotes from the book. If you're watching, don't be afraid, just start to tape that flashback to Louis and Daniel as they're doing the interview, and Daniel's just like that drunk woman at a bar who's just like totally like love it. Everything that Louis says in that scene about Lestat is lifted directly from the book. So it would be interesting to compare the two, right? But also I think there's so much at this point that we still haven't seen the truth of, that like I want to actually do this as its own video. But looking at it after season 3, maybe season 4 as well, but just so you know, I'm going to stick a pin in this actually and come back to it later, because that would be really interesting to just deep dive into. And I think, that's really all I had. Parts of it, like I said, were written out, and some of it I had to make up on the spot. And I was intending to talk a little bit about like how vampires are portrayed before interview, but then I moved books out of the way for Tux, and then ended up not getting in the window after all, so I kind of just skipped past that. But I'm not going to get into it, but I am going to circle back to the books that I think I was planning to use. Definitely the book that I am very certain I was going to use for this, and then I'll bring up another one too. Because I'm the sort of person, hyperfixations, obsessions, what have you, I'm not just going to read a fictional book about a vampire. I'm going to read, it's not, I don't know if I need to cover this part of the cover or not. Like, this isn't a textbook, but it is like this whole nonfiction about how vampires have been portrayed in popular culture throughout, like, starting with like early legends, where, whether it's like Hungarian folklore or, the ways like through like medieval times and the 1800s and early, getting into the story of, Mercy Brown, and then obviously getting into, Dracula, Polidori, Carmilla, all of that, and just continuing on through the 90s, the film version of What We Do in the Shadows. There's pictures in here, so it's not a textbook, but it is like this whole like nonfiction. We've got the Twilight movie franchise. We've got references to the Dark Shadows movie. We've got a little bit about the Muppets in here. And of course, like, explanations of, like, why exactly do we find vampires hot? Because we often do. And why like vampirism. Anyway, the way that they're portrayed in popular culture, the different kind of permutations from early legends, like when we start actually recognizing like what we currently think of as vampires, when that starts popping up in fiction. And I showed the cover, but I didn't want to. The book is A History of the Vampire in Popular Culture, Love at First Bite by Violet Fenn. Violet, like the color of the plant, and then Fenn, Fenn. And then it'd be really interesting to do more based off of this book, which is from the Popular Culture and Philosophy series. There's also a Pop Culture and Psychology series. I want to slowly collect more and more of both of those. Because that's my whole thing, philosophy, psychology, but like applying, you know, the lessons you can learn about those from pop culture. Anyway, this is Zombies, Vampires, and Philosophy, New Life for the Undead. It's edited by Richard Green and K. Salim, I think, Muhammad. And, you know, I think I got both of these used. I mean, definitely this one. It's from Oakwood Village Library and Art Center, Toronto Public Library. I got this one from Canada, I guess. And it's a whole collection of essays. Oh, look, popular culture and philosophy. It's a list of, like, all of the titles they had at the time that this was published. Probably can't actually read that. It looks like there was 51 at the time published, with the Soccer and Philosophy being published in 2010, and then more in preparation, including Doctor Who and Philosophy, which I have that one. Also Dexter and Philosophy, which would be interesting. Anyway, it's a whole collection of philosophical essays about zombies and vampires, and like what zombies and vampires can kind of demonstrate of philosophical concepts. So there's ontology, there's like the idea of like why would it be bad to be undead, and getting into, you know, the idea of personhood and the value of human life, which I'm not a huge zombie fan in general, but there's this whole chapter, essay, what have you, When There's No More Room in Hell, The Dead Will Shop the Earth, Romero and Aristotle on Zombies, Happiness, and Consumption by Matthew Walker. You can see it here. Zombies as Critique of Capitalism. Gotta love that. Mindless consumerism. More. I mean, come on. This is... I guess I'm really showing, like, how much of a geek I am, but, like, this sort of stuff, like, seriously examining pop culture, like, it's literally what I'm trying to do on this channel. Here's a book example. This is my whole thing. You know, the bloody connection between vampires and vegetarians, Wayne Ewan. Hedonism and Rousseau and the Vampires Toward a Political Philosophy of the Undead, Philip Cole. Like, these guys are nerds, man. And I wrote a whole collection of very nerdy essays, and here I am reading and recommending it because I am these guys are nerds that will write this stuff, and I'm the nerd that will read this stuff and recommend it. So, I will, even though they're not direct sources for anything that I said in here, I will do a further reading section like I did with my horror and hope punk essay. At the end of it, after sources, I put in like a further reading section, and I'll do that here and link. I'll do my best to find those books again and link them. I like to do that with the books I recommend, so I don't just like show, yes, here is the title of the book and who wrote it and when it was published by whichever publisher. I also want to make sure that like it's a link to where you can buy the book. New, used, paperback, hardback, not virtual, but like, on a device, what have you, preferably from independent bookstores, or I guess in this case, like the Toronto Public Library. Just to make it more accessible for people if they are interested in reading the books that I use for these videos. They don't have to go track down a copy. Here's a link to where you can get them. Also supporting independent bookstores. So I think I perked up a little. Talking about my hyperfixation does help. So I think that's it. I think that's it for this video. And I will see you guys sometime next week. I say it that way because I am thinking about adjusting my filming schedule. So maybe not even next week. If I adjust it, I might take a break this week. And maybe start posting on like Mondays and Tuesdays instead. I don't know. If I'm not able to continue with my current therapist, there's someone within the same like clinic that she would recommend me to who does weekend appointments. So whether I adjust my filming schedule or I adjust when I do therapy, still doing it, just different time, remains to be seen. I have like a month to figure things out with therapy. So we'll see. I will keep you guys updated on, whether or not my posting schedule is going to change. And I will try to keep you guys more updated about other projects that I have in the work to share with you guys, including, eventually a published novel. Eventually. But I do have other things as well. And yeah, I just always thank you guys so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. All the buttons. And just thank you guys so much for the support that you've shown me over the last month or so. And I will see you in another video sometime soon. Alright, everybody. Bye, guys. Love you all.